Warsaw, 1887. A young eye doctor sits at his desk, holding a plan that he believes will unite humanity. His name is Ludwig Lazar Zamenhof. He has spent years building a new language from scratch, simple, regular, with no irregular verbs and no exceptions to memorize. He calls it Esperanto. But a language with one speaker is useless, so Zamenhof designs a scheme. He asks people around the world to sign a pledge. I promise to learn Esperanto once 10 million others have promised the same. 10 million signatures, and the world changes overnight. He receives roughly 1,000. 1,000 out of 10 million. The simplest language ever built had failed its first test, not because it was hard to learn, but because of something no grammar could fix. To understand what went wrong in Warsaw, we need to ask a bigger question. What would actually happen if Zamenhof had succeeded? If every human being on Earth woke up tomorrow speaking the same language?
Economists model trade between countries using something called the gravity model. The idea that trade works like gravity. Bigger economies pull harder, distance weakens the pull. But when researchers run the numbers across hundreds of country pairs, one variable keeps standing out: a binary flag. Do these two countries share a language? When they do, everything else held constant: size, distance, trade deals, currency, bilateral trade jumps by roughly 45 to 58%. Not because goods move faster, because friction disappears. No translation fees, no contract ambiguity, no search costs when a buyer in one country tries to find a supplier in another. Language barriers are, economically speaking, a tax on every international transaction, paid invisibly, billions of times a day. The Swiss economist Francois Grin put a price tag on just one piece of this. The European Union operates with 24 official languages, and it spends enormous sums every year on interpreters and document translation. But Grin found something less obvious hiding underneath.
Because English functions as the de facto working language, native English-speaking countries collect what amount to monopoly rents, savings and competitive advantages they never pay for, while every other nation foots the bill for language education and lost productivity during acquisition. Grin calculated that if the EU adopted a single structurally neutral language, it could save around 25 billion euros per year. Scale that logic to the entire planet: corporate translation budgets, localized marketing, legal reconciliation,
And linguistic unity would free up hundreds of billions of dollars annually. So, on pure economics, one language looks like the best deal humanity has ever been offered. And then it gets better. Consider how science works today. English dominates academic publishing, somewhere between 75 and 95% of indexed papers in the natural sciences. That sounds efficient. One shared medium, one global library. But look closer, and there's a hidden toll. Researchers publishing in PLOS Biology found that non-native English speakers have their manuscripts rejected for language reasons at roughly 2.5 times the rate of native speakers of comparable scientific standing. Same science, different syntax, rejection. The costs compound quietly. Extra hours spent translating and proofreading instead of researching, editing fees, papers written in regional journals going uncited because they're invisible to the global audience. And reviewers, often without realizing it, read non-native phrasing as a signal about the quality of the work itself. You might assume modern technology fixes this. It doesn't.
A Stanford study of tens of thousands of peer reviews at major computer science conferences found that even with authors using large language models to polish their writing, reviewers still pick up on subtle stylistic cues, infer where an author is from, and unconsciously judge the science more harshly. Now, run our experiment. In a world where everyone shares one native language, all of it vanishes. The researcher in Colombia or India or Germany stops paying the tax. Discoveries are judged purely on merit. For the first time in history, the global scientific playing field is genuinely level. Trade optimized, Science democratized. Hundreds of billions recovered. Case closed? Not even close, because we haven't counted what gets deleted. There are over 7,000 living languages on Earth right now. Cognitive scientist Lera Boroditsky has spent her career showing that these aren't just 7,000 vocabularies for the same thoughts. They're 7,000 ways of training the human mind. In the Aboriginal community of Pormpuraaw in Australia, the local language has no words for left or right. Speakers navigate using only cardinal directions: north, south, east, west.
To speak the language at all, you must maintain a constant internal compass, always knowing exactly which way you're facing. And they can do it effortlessly, indoors, in the dark. Speakers of languages like English simply cannot perform at that level. Or take color. Russian forces its speakers to distinguish light blue, goluboy, from dark blue, sini, every single time they speak. As a result, Russians discriminate between those shades measurably faster than English speakers do. An obligatory word changes early-stage visual processing. Even time isn't universal. English speakers lay out the past and future left to right, matching their writing. Mandarin speakers often use vertical metaphors. Earlier is up, later is down. And Pormpuraaw speakers arrange time from east to west, following the sun, which means their mental timeline rotates as their body turns. This is the scientifically supported version of linguistic relativity. Language doesn't imprison thought, but it builds habits of attention, memory, and perception. 7,000 languages means 7,000 trained minds. Collapse them into one, and human cognitive diversity contracts to a single habitual way of framing reality. And there's something even older at stake.
Indigenous languages encode traditional ecological knowledge, precise taxonomies of local plants, animals, soils, and climate patterns refined over generations. This knowledge lives inside vocabulary and grammar. When a language dies, the classification system dies with it, and generational knowledge transmission breaks, taking with it local strategies for conservation and land management that exist nowhere else. We would be trading thousands of operating systems for the human mind in exchange for cheaper shipping invoices. Still, maybe you accept that trade. Maybe efficiency wins. Here's the problem. It wouldn't even last. Every plan for a universal language makes the same quiet assumption that once achieved, it stays achieved. History says otherwise. 2,000 years ago, the Western Roman Empire ran on Latin. Not Cicero's classical Latin, vulgar Latin, the working language of soldiers, merchants, and administrators from Britain to North Africa. For centuries, it was the closest thing Europe had to a single tongue. Then, the empire dissolved, communities drifted apart, and speech began to change, the way speech always changes.
Pronunciations shifted as generations minimized effort and signaled local identity. New words appeared for new local realities. Old words split into different meanings. Communities deliberately coined slang to mark who belonged and who didn't. Within several centuries, vulgar Latin had speciated into Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, Catalan, not dialects, languages so different that a Roman farmer resurrected today couldn't order bread in Paris or Rome. Linguists project the same fate for any future world language.
Unless a global authority enforced grammar and pronunciation everywhere, forever, or unless every human subgroup stayed in continuous daily contact, drift is inevitable. Within 300 to 500 years, regional varieties would diverge into mutually unintelligible tongues again. We wouldn't just lose the unified world. We'd lose it slowly, watching it happen, powerless to stop it. Which brings us back to that office in Warsaw. Zamenhof's language was brilliant by every structural measure.
French students need roughly 1,500 hours of instruction to become proficient in English. The equivalent level in Esperanto takes about 150, 10 times less effort, 0 irregular verbs, complete neutrality, belonging to no empire, no ethnic group, no superpower. None of it mattered. Because languages don't spread through elegance. They spread through network effects. The value of learning a language depends entirely on how many people already speak it. When that number is small, the rational choice is always to learn the big, messy, dominant language instead. Economists call it a coordination trap, and it's why 10 million pledges produced 1,000 signatures. Everyone was waiting for everyone else. That same trap explains why English, structurally chaotic, full of exceptions, keeps expanding, while simpler alternatives stall.
Economic power picks the world's language. Design doesn't. So the thought experiment ends in an irony. A single global language would unlock enormous wealth and genuine fairness in science, but it would erase thousands of distinct ways of being human, and then, given time, quietly dissolve back into Babel anyway. 7,000 languages isn't humanity's failure to coordinate. It might be the most successful experiment our species has ever running. 7,000 parallel answers to the question of what it means to think. Zamenhof's dream failed in 1887. What it was trying to replace may be worth more than he imagined.